If you have ever gone hiking, even once, a local trail, a national park, a path marked as easy on your phone, you have trusted something that does not care if you come back. Because trails are not roads. They are not monitored. They do not promise cell service or witnesses or help when something goes wrong. They are suggestions carved into wilderness, maintained just enough to feel safe and abandoned the moment you step off them. Most people think the danger is the wildlife, the bears, the snakes, the cliffs and sudden storms. But those are honest threats. They announce themselves. They do not pretend. The real danger is quieter. It is the moment you step off the path to use the bathroom, the stretch of trail where the forest goes silent, the voice you hear when no one else is around, the fall that happens just far enough from help, the shelter you enter to wait out a storm and leave far later than you should have. Hiking feels safe because it is familiar, because people post photos, because there are signs, because someone walked that trail yesterday and survived it. But trails do not remember people. They do not care how prepared you are, and they do not stop you from making one small decision that turns a day hike into a disappearance. A wrong turn, a few lost minutes, a broken bone, a stretch of time that does not behave the way it should. Tonight, these are not stories about explorers or extreme survival. These are modern hiking stories, the kind that begin with charged phones, weather apps, and confidence, and end with silence, confusion, and the realization that the woods were never empty. 5 hikers, 5 trails people trust, and 5 moments where something went wrong. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly enough that by the time they noticed, the trail was already gone. So stay on the path. Tell someone where you are going, watch the weather, and if the woods grow too quiet, or the trail does not look the way you remember, do not keep walking forward, hoping it will fix itself. Because in the wilderness, the most dangerous step is the one you take after you think you are already safe. Story 1. Off the Trail, Baxter State Park, Maine. I told myself it would be quick. That was the lie that started everything. It was early October in Baxter, the kind of morning that looks harmless from a distance but carries teeth in the shade. The air had that clean, sharp smell like whetstone and pine sap, and every breath felt like it was scrubbing my lungs. I'd driven up before dawn, coffee cooling in the cup holder, phone playing a half-hearted playlist that kept cutting out as the signal died. By the time I reached the trailhead, the world felt unplugged. No buzzing notifications, no traffic, no voices, just the hush of trees and my boots on gravel. I was doing the thing I always do when life gets too loud. I was going to walk until my thoughts calmed down. I'd picked a route that wasn't ambitious, not a brag hike, just enough miles to feel it in my legs and come back with that clean, emptied out kind of tired. I had a hydration pack, a snack bag with jerky and an apple, a small first aid kit, and a paper map I'd barely looked at because my phone had offline maps. I had told myself I was responsible, prepared, smarter than the people in the cautionary stories. The forest didn't care about any of that. At first it was perfect. The trail was a ribbon of packed dirt stitched between roots and rocks. Sunlight came through in pale slants, catching on spiderwebs strung between branches. Fallen leaves made the ground look like it had been painted. I remember thinking that it felt staged, like a movie set, too pretty to be real. Maybe that was my first warning. A mile in, I passed 2 hikers coming back down. Older couple, cheeks pink from the cold, matching trekking poles. We exchanged that little trail nod that says, "We're all temporary allies here." The man smiled and told me it was quiet up ahead. I thought he meant peaceful. I walked another 30 minutes and the woods began to close in. Not dramatically, not like a door slamming, just a subtle narrowing. The trees grew closer together. The trail dipped into a stretch where the sunlight stopped reaching the ground, and the air turned damp and still. I could hear my own breathing, and the soft creak of straps against my jacket. Then I felt it, the pressure in my bladder that had been whispering for a while, now insistent. No big deal. Everyone does it. Step off the trail, go behind a tree, come back. I checked my watch. Still plenty of time. I glanced up and down the path. No one in sight. The forest around me was dense, but not impassable. Just a few feet. 10, maybe. I picked a spot where the underbrush looked thinner, pushed through a cluster of young firs, and stepped off the packed dirt into leaves and moss. The trail vanished behind me faster than it should have. At first I laughed at myself. It was just the way the trees lined up, the way the light changed. I did what I came to do, then zipped up, pulled my pack straps back into place, and turned around to step right back onto the path. Except there was no path. There should have been a clear break in the trees, a line of trampled dirt, that slightly lower strip where boots had compressed the ground over and over. Instead, I saw trunks, branches, a wall of green and brown that looked untouched. I stood there for a second, waiting for my eyes to adjust, like the trail would come into focus if I blinked the right way. Nothing changed. I walked forward, confident at first, moving the way you move when you know you're about to prove your own small anxiety wrong. I pushed aside a fern, stepped around a rock, ducked under a branch, and stopped. Still no trail. I turned in a slow circle. The leaves on the ground were uniform, crisp, unbroken, no footprints, no scuffed dirt. The moss looked plush, undisturbed. It wasn't just that I couldn't see the trail. It was like the trail had never been there at all. A cold, ridiculous thought came to me, and I hated myself for it. Did I turn the wrong way? I backed up, trying to step exactly in my own prints, but the forest floor didn't hold them the way dirt would. Leaves shifted and settled. Moss sprang back. My evidence erased itself the moment I made it. I pulled out my phone. No signal, which I expected, but I didn't need signal for the map. I opened my offline app, waited for the blue dot to appear. The screen stayed blank. The app spun, then showed a grid, then nothing. Like the phone couldn't decide where on earth I was. That little delay, that small technological hesitation, did something to my nerves. It made the problem feel bigger, as if even my devices were confused by this place. Okay, I said out loud, like talking made it less serious. Okay, it's right there. I chose a direction based on where I thought the trail had been, and I walked. I pushed through branches and stepped over a fallen log. I counted my steps, because I'd stepped off maybe 10 feet. 15. I reached 30, then 50, then I stopped and my stomach dropped, because the woods looked different now. I don't mean subtly different. I mean like I'd crossed into a new section without noticing. The trees here were thicker, darker bark, older. The ground was less leafy and more needled, as if the forest floor had been swept clean by time. The air smelled different too, sharper, like cold water over stone. The little sounds I'd been hearing, my jacket, my pack, seemed swallowed. It was quieter, not a peaceful quiet, a listening quiet. I turned around quickly, trying to see my way back, but the space behind me didn't look like the space I'd just come through. It was a maze of trunks and branches that all looked the same. I couldn't pick out the distinctive log I'd stepped over or the rock I'd avoided. My heart began to tap faster. Panic is a physical thing. It's not just fear in your mind, it's your body deciding you're in danger and flooding you with chemicals. My fingers went cold. My mouth dried out. My hearing sharpened, then dulled, like my brain was trying to decide what to prioritize. I did the worst thing you can do when you're lost. I hurried. I pushed forward more aggressively, determined to hit the trail again. The logic was simple. The trail runs through these woods. If I keep moving, I'll cross it. But the deeper I moved, the less familiar everything became. I started noticing details that felt wrong in small ways. A tree with a scar that looked like claw marks, deep and old, too high up. A pile of stones that seemed stacked, not naturally fallen. A branch bent in an arc, like someone had pulled it down and left it. Markers, my brain insisted. Then my brain corrected itself. Or traps. I forced myself to stop. I took a breath and tried to think like someone who had watched too many survival videos. Stop. Breathe. Don't keep wandering. Make a plan. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. The compass app loaded, then spun, then pointed one direction, then another, jittery, like it was being teased by invisible magnets. I pulled out the paper map, unfolded it with shaking hands, and immediately realized I didn't know where I was on it. The trail I'd chosen was a thin line among many. The park was a web of roots. I could have been anywhere. A bird called somewhere in the distance, a sharp sound that made me flinch. I listened for other noises, for voices, for footsteps, for the faint rush of a river, anything that would orient me. All I heard was the soft, slow creak of trees swaying, and my own breath. Then I heard something else, a footstep, not mine. It was faint, almost swallowed by the forest, but it was there. A soft crunch, then another, measured, slow, like someone walking carefully so they wouldn't be heard. I froze. "Hello?" I called. No answer. The footsteps stopped too, like whatever made them had paused in response. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it was shaking my ribs. I stood perfectly still, listening so intensely it hurt. Nothing. Then, from somewhere behind me, I heard the same soft crunch again, one step, then another. It wasn't close enough for me to see anything. It was just close enough to make my imagination lunge into worst-case scenarios. Bear, moose, person. I backed up without thinking, stepping over roots, trying to move quietly even though my limbs felt clumsy. I glanced behind me, but the trees hid everything. Then, impossibly, I heard the step again, this time from my left. My head snapped toward it. My eyes searched. Branches, shadows, nothing moving. The footstep came again, now from my right, as if whatever it was had circled while I stood still. My mind did a strange thing then. Instead of screaming danger, it offered another explanation, echo, sound bouncing. But in a forest, with soft ground, there isn't much echo, and footsteps don't echo in different directions like that unless something is making them. I broke into a run. I didn't plan it. My body decided. I pushed through brush, branches whipping my face. My pack jostled. My boots slipped on damp leaves. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook, until I couldn't stand it anymore and I had to stop, bent over, hands on my knees. When I straightened up, I realized the worst part. I no longer had any idea which way I'd run. The forest around me was dense, featureless, uniform. There was no break in the trees, no hint of a trail, no sky visible through the canopy, just a thick weave of needles and branches. I called out again, louder this time, my voice cracking. "Hello, I'm lost." My words vanished into the trees. The forest swallowed them without giving anything back. I tried to calm myself by doing inventory. Water, food, warm layer, a whistle on my pack strap, a lighter, a tiny emergency blanket. I was okay for now. It was still daylight, although the quality of light had changed, growing dimmer in the thick canopy. I reminded myself that I could stay put, that if anyone knew my plan, they'd look for me. But then I remembered the truth. I hadn't told anyone exactly where I was going. I'd texted a friend, hiking today, might be out of range. That was it. No trail name, no estimated return time, nothing. I swallowed hard, feeling the consequences of that casual confidence. I tried to backtrack to my original bathroom spot, convinced that if I found it, I could find the trail. But backtracking in the woods is like trying to rewind a dream. Every direction looks plausible until it doesn't. After 10 minutes of searching, I found something that made my stomach turn. A piece of bright orange plastic ribbon tied to a branch. Trail tape. My relief was instant and intense. It hit me like warmth. I moved toward it, almost laughing, like the woods had finally decided to stop messing with me. Then I noticed something. The ribbon was faded, not sun-faded, like it had been out for a season. It looked weathered, frayed at the edges, dirty, like it had been there for years. And the knot was tight, deliberate. Someone had tied it carefully. Baxter's maintained. Trails are marked. Things don't just get left like this. I looked around for more tape, expecting to see a line of markers, but there was only the one. A single breadcrumb. A lure. I stood there staring at it, and I became aware of the silence again. Not the calm silence of nature, but the heavy pause of a room after someone says something they shouldn't. Then the footsteps returned. Closer. One crunch, then another. I whipped around, and this time I saw movement. Just a flicker between two trunks. Something dark, low to the ground, slipping behind cover. My throat tightened. I raised my whistle, but hesitated, because the sound felt like it would shatter whatever fragile control I still had. The footsteps came again, and I realized they weren't human. There was no rhythm of heel to toe. It was a soft, uneven pressure, like pads on leaves. Predator. My mind flashed images of teeth, claws, a sudden weight on my back. My body went cold. I forced myself to move, but slowly. Running blindly again would just make everything worse. I kept the orange ribbon in sight for one more second. Then I stepped away from it, choosing a direction that felt like it might lead downhill, because downhill usually leads to water, and water usually leads somewhere. The woods shifted again as I moved. The trees seemed to lean in. The ground became uneven, cluttered with rocks. My boots slipped once, and I caught myself against a trunk, bark rough under my palm. I tried not to think about the thing behind me, but every sound became suspect. A branch snap, a leaf rustle, my own breathing. I stopped at a small clearing where sunlight actually reached the ground. It felt like stepping into a spotlight. I could see my own hands trembling. I could see the tightness of my grip on my phone, knuckles pale. And in that clearing, I saw something that made my blood drain. Footprints. Not mine. They were pressed into the soft patch of earth near a rock, deep and clear, like someone had stepped there recently. Bare footprints, too big for a child, too narrow for boots, toes splayed slightly, as if whoever had made them walked barefoot often. The heel impression was heavy, deliberate. I stared until my eyes blurred, and then I heard, very softly, from the trees behind me, a voice. Not a whisper in the wind, not my mind, a voice. It said my name, the way someone says it when they're close enough that you should be able to see them. I spun toward the sound and saw nothing but trunks and shadow. My name came again, slightly different, like the speaker was practicing it, like they were tasting it. I don't know what I would have done next if a sound hadn't cut through everything. A long, sharp whistle, a human whistle. It came from far away, faint, but real. It was followed by a second whistle, then a third, like a call and response. Relief hit me so hard it made my knees weak. I raised my own whistle and blew with everything I had. The sound ripped out of me, loud and piercing. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard voices, real voices. Not my name, just general shouting, distant but undeniable. I blew again, and again, the footsteps behind me vanished. The forest seemed to exhale. The silence loosened its grip. When the ranger finally appeared between the trees, green uniform, radio at his shoulder, my body did something humiliating. It sagged. I started crying, fast and hot, the kind of crying you don't control. He reached me with another person behind him and asked if I was hurt. I shook my head and tried to speak but couldn't. They guided me toward the trail I had lost. And here's the part that still doesn't sit right in my mind, no matter how many times I replay it. We walked less than 5 minutes before we stepped onto the packed dirt path. Less than 5 minutes. The ranger asked where I'd left it. I pointed, trying to show him where I'd stepped off. He frowned. "That's not a spur," he said. "There's nothing marked there." I insisted. I told him I'd only gone a few feet. I told him about the ribbon, the footprints, the voice. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He just looked at the trees with a careful, tight expression, like someone who has heard 100 versions of the same story and never found a good explanation. When we reached the trailhead, the day was nearly gone. My car sat alone, coated in a thin layer of fallen leaves like it had been there longer than it had. The ranger asked me questions, routine questions, but his eyes kept sliding toward the forest as if he expected something to step out. Before I left, he told me something I wish he hadn't. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "This park takes people." I asked what he meant. He looked at me, and his face was serious in a way that made my skin crawl. "Off the trail," he said. "That's when it happens." I drove away with my hands locked on the steering wheel, my phone still useless, no signal until I hit the main road. When the bars finally popped back up, a flood of notifications came in, and one of them, buried among missed calls and texts, was a message that made my breath catch. A photo from my phone's camera roll, time-stamped while I was lost. It was a picture of the forest floor, close up, bare footprints in damp soil, and beside them, just at the edge of the frame, was a shadow that didn't belong to any tree. A long, upright shadow shaped like a person, standing just out of view, watching. Story 2. When the Woods Went Quiet, Acadia National Park, Maine. Acadia is the kind of place that makes you believe in clean starts. Ocean air, granite cliffs, pine forests that smell like resin and salt. Even the light looks different there, like it has been filtered through water. I went in late spring, the season where the mornings still feel cold but the afternoons promise warmth. It was supposed to be an easy day hike, one I'd done pieces of before, nothing extreme. I wanted the kind of exertion that clears your head without demanding your life. I parked at a small lot that wasn't full yet. There were a few cars, a couple of families unloading strollers, an older man tightening his laces. Normal. Safe. I remember thinking, if anything goes wrong, there are people everywhere. That assumption lasted about 40 minutes. The trail climbed through a stretch of forest where the trees grew tight and tall. The ground was damp from recent rain. Ferns unfurled beside the path like green hands. I could hear the ocean at first, distant but constant. That steady roar that reminds you the world is big and moving even when you're alone. Then the fog rolled in. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't pour down like smoke in a horror movie. It slid between the trees like someone exhaling. One moment the air was clear enough to see light on branches. The next, everything beyond 30 feet softened and blurred. At first I loved it. Fog makes the world feel private. It wraps you up. It turns every sound into a secret. Then the birds stopped. I didn't notice right away. It was one of those things your brain registers without attention, like when the fridge stops humming and you suddenly become aware of the quiet. The forest had been full of small noises, chirps and calls, rustling leaves, distant tapping of a woodpecker. And then, nothing. No birds, no wind, no insects. Even the ocean sound faded, as if someone had turned a dial down. I slowed, listening, and the absence pressed in. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a calm day. It was a deliberate quiet, the kind that makes you feel like you're interrupting something. I stopped walking and held still. My breath sounded too loud. I could hear the soft click of my hydration tube against my jacket. I could hear the faintest creak of my pack straps, but the forest itself was mute. I tried to laugh it off. Fog does that, I told myself. It muffles sound. Maybe the birds just moved somewhere else. I kept walking. The trail curved, then dipped, passing through a low area where the ground turned spongy. The fog thickened. The trees became silhouettes. The world narrowed to what was directly in front of me, and beyond that, a blank gray wall. That's when I heard the first response. It was subtle, a sound so small it could have been my imagination. I stepped on a twig, a crisp snap, and a second later, somewhere ahead of me, another twig snapped. I froze, because the timing was wrong. Echo doesn't work like that in a forest. There's no hard surface to bounce sound off. And the second snap didn't sound like my twig snapping, it sounded like someone stepping on one. I waited. Nothing. I took another step, carefully this time, trying not to make noise. My boot pressed into damp earth with a soft squish. A second later, ahead of me, another squish. My skin prickled. The hairs on my arms lifted under my sleeves. "Hello?" I called. Voice too loud in the mute air. No answer. I stood there, heart tapping, trying to convince myself it was an animal. Deer. Fox. Something moving in the brush. But the sound had been too measured, too controlled. I started walking again, faster, not running yet, just trying to get to a more open stretch where I could see. The fog made distance unreliable. A tree 10 feet away looked like it was floating. Branches appeared and vanished as I moved, and the responding sounds followed me. Not always, not constant, just enough to make my mind latch onto it. A step after mine, a rustle after mine. The quiet between responses was the worst part, because it forced me to anticipate the next one. My phone had signal, faint, but enough. I checked the map. I was still on trail. The blue dot moved, steady, obedient. The digital world insisted everything was normal. The real world disagreed. Then I heard something that stopped me cold. My own breathing, but not from my chest, from somewhere behind me. It was faint, like someone trying to breathe quietly, but it matched my rhythm too closely. Inhale, pause, exhale. Like a mirror. I stopped breathing. The sound behind me stopped too. I spun around so fast my pack shifted hard against my shoulders. Nothing, just fog and trees. No movement, no figure, no eyes. The silence returned, thick and heavy, and for the first time I understood something deep and instinctive. Quiet is not the absence of sound. Quiet is what happens when everything decides to stop at once. I started walking again, but now every step felt like an announcement. My body wanted to shrink, to become smaller, quieter, less noticeable. The responding sounds continued, and I realized with a slow dread that they weren't coming from one direction. Sometimes they were ahead, sometimes behind, sometimes to the side. Like whatever it was didn't have to move the way I did. like it could be anywhere. I began to see shapes in the fog that looked like people until I got closer and realized they were trunks. My mind kept offering me false relief. A hiker, a ranger, someone normal. Every time it was wrong. The trail forked. I paused, looking for the signpost. It was there, but the fog dampened even its presence, and the letters looked smeared with moisture. I leaned closer to read. As I did, a whisper slid past my ear. It wasn't words. It was a breath, a sound shaped like the beginning of speech that never became anything. It was so close, I felt the faint coolness of it. My whole body jolted. I stumbled back, almost falling. My hand flew to my ear as if I could catch the whisper like a bug. Nothing. I looked at the sign again, and my stomach turned. There was a scratch in the wood, fresh, like someone had carved into it recently. Not vandalism, not a name, just a line, vertical, then another. Marks like tally marks, but uneven. I backed away from the fork and chose the direction that led toward what I hoped was the open. The responding sounds grew closer, not louder, just closer, as if whatever was making them was tightening a circle. I wanted to run. Running feels like action, like control. But I'd read enough to know running is how you get lost fast. It's how you fall. It's how you panic yourself into stupidity. So I walked fast, head swiveling, eyes trying to pierce fog that refused to give anything up. Then, through the gray, I saw a figure, a person, standing just off the trail. My relief hit me so hard it almost made me dizzy. I lifted a hand, mouth opening to call out. But something about the figure was wrong. They weren't moving, not shifting their weight, not adjusting, not breathing visibly. They stood too still, like a cutout. And as I got closer, I realized the shape wasn't a person at all. It was a tree. A dead trunk with a branch broken off at shoulder height. The silhouette of a head and torso. My mind had made it human because it needed human. I kept walking, throat tight, and then I saw something else. A pile of cairn stones beside the trail, stacked neatly. And beside it, another pile, and another. Too many, like breadcrumbs. Like someone wanted hikers to follow. I stopped at one and saw something wedged between two stones. A piece of plastic, a modern snack wrapper, bright and clean, like it had been dropped recently. But the edges were folded in an odd way, deliberate. I touched it, and my fingers came away damp. Not from fog. It smelled faintly metallic. My stomach rolled. I pulled my hand back and wiped it on my pants, suddenly aware of my own vulnerability. I was alone. Visibility low, noises wrong, and my mind was already fracturing at the edges. That's when the forest went quieter than it had been yet. So quiet that I could hear my pulse. And in that deep quiet, I heard my phone vibrate. A text. My friend back home, asking how the hike was going. The screen lit up, and the light felt obscene, too bright in the fog. I typed quickly with shaking hands. Something is wrong. Fog. No sounds. I think someone is near me. I hit send. The message didn't go through. No service now. I looked up from my phone and realized I had stopped in the middle of the trail. And behind me, in the fog, I heard a slow exhale, like someone sighing in patience. I turned, and I finally saw it. Not clearly, because the fog wouldn't allow clarity, but enough. A shape, tall, upright, just beyond the trees. It was too narrow to be a person in a jacket. It didn't have the bulk of a pack. It didn't move like a hiker shifting. It moved like something learning how to stand. I stared, frozen, and the shape tilted slightly, as if it was studying me back. Then, from that direction, I heard the quietest sound in the world. A twig snap, not in response to my step, not mirroring. A statement. I did what fear does best. It chose for me. I ran. I ran hard, boots slipping, lungs burning, fog tearing past my face in wet streaks. The trail blurred. I didn't care about twisting an ankle. I didn't care about falling. I cared about distance. Behind me, I heard no pursuit. That was worse. I burst into an open area, so suddenly it felt like breaking the surface of water. The fog thinned. The sound of the ocean returned in a rush, loud and real, and I nearly sobbed from the normalcy of it. A couple stood near a lookout point, taking photos. They turned at the sound of my approach, startled. I stopped in front of them, bent over, gasping, and said, "Did you see anyone behind me?" They exchanged a look. "No," the woman said carefully. Just you. I looked back down the trail. Fog lingered in the trees, but it wasn't as thick here. The path looked normal, harmless, like nothing had happened, like the forest had reset itself the moment I reached witnesses. I stayed near those strangers until my breathing steadied. I walked back toward the parking lot with them, not caring if I looked unhinged. I needed other humans around me like I needed air. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed again. My text finally sent. Delayed. But that wasn't what made my blood go cold. It was a notification beneath it. A voicemail, time-stamped 20 minutes earlier. No caller ID. I pressed play without thinking. At first, it was just silence. Then, faintly, I heard the sound of footsteps on damp earth. And then my own voice, distant and warped, calling out, "Hello?" A pause. Then a soft breath, right against the microphone. And a whisper that wasn't words, but sounded like someone shaping my name with a mouth that didn't quite know how. I deleted the voicemail. It came back the next day. Same file, same timestamp, like it had never left. Story 3. The Voice on the Ridge, White Mountains, New Hampshire. People talk about the White Mountains like they're cute, like they're practice peaks. They're not. They're a machine that turns confidence into caution. They're a place where weather doesn't change, it flips. One minute you're sweating in sun, the next you're pulling on layers with numb fingers while the world turns gray. I went because I thought I needed to prove something to myself. I'd been working too much, sleeping too little, living in that modern haze where your mind is always half in a screen. Hiking felt like penance, like a reset button. I chose a ridge route because it promised views and because the photos online made it look manageable. I started early. The trail climbed through forest, then opened onto rocky stretches where the wind had more authority. My calves burned, my breath clouded. My phone was in airplane mode to save battery, and I felt proud of myself for that small discipline. By mid-morning, the sky began to shift. Clouds gathered low and fast, dragging shadows over the peaks. The temperature dropped, and the wind came alive, pushing at my jacket like hands. I should have turned back. Instead, I told myself I could make the ridge and return before it got bad. The voice started as I reached the exposed section. At first, it sounded like someone talking far away, muffled by wind. A casual tone, like hikers chatting. I looked ahead, expecting to see a group cresting a rock. No one. The ridge was empty. Just stone and scrub and the long drop on either side. I kept walking, and the sound came again, clearer. Hey. It was close enough to make me turn sharply. Still no one. My stomach tightened. Wind does strange things, I told myself. It carries sound. It tricks you. I walked on. The trail markers were small cairns and paint blazes on rocks. In clear weather, they're easy. In shifting fog, they become lifelines. The clouds thickened and visibility shrank. The world turned white and gray, like I'd stepped inside a blank photograph. Then I heard my name, not shouted, spoken calmly like someone beside me. I stopped so abruptly my boots skidded on stone. My name came again, gentle. It sounded like my sister. That was impossible. My sister was states away. She hated hiking. She wouldn't even know where I was. I spun, scanning the fog, heart pounding. Nothing. The voice came again. You're going the wrong way. I stared at the trail ahead, the cairn stones barely visible through mist. A cold dread seeped into me, slow and thick. The voice was so familiar, so perfectly her tone, that it made my skin crawl. Hallucination, my brain offered, trying to be helpful. Stress, lack of sleep, thin air, but it didn't feel like an internal thought. It felt external, placed in the air. I kept walking, because stopping made the fog feel closer. The wind tugged harder. Fine mist beaded on my eyelashes. My hands went numb despite my gloves. Turn around, the voice said, now from behind me. I turned, and in the fog, I saw a shape. A human silhouette, maybe 20 feet away, standing still. Relief surged. Hey, I called, voice thin in the wind. Are you okay? The shape didn't move. I took a step toward it, then another. The shape stayed the same size, the same distance, like it was attached to the fog itself. I stopped. The wind gusted, and the fog shifted, and the silhouette vanished like a trick of light. My mouth went dry. "You're tired," the voice said, sympathetic. "You should sit. You'll slip." It sounded like concern, like help. That was the most terrifying part, because my mind wanted to believe it. My body wanted permission to stop. I looked down and realized how exposed I was. One wrong step, one slick rock, and I'd tumble. The ridge didn't forgive. I forced myself to focus on practical things. Find the next cairn, move carefully, keep breathing steady. The voice kept talking, calm, guiding, always just slightly out of sync with what I saw. "Left," it would say when the trail looked right. "Down," when the ridge rose. "Not that one," it warned, when I stepped toward a stable-looking rock. At first I resisted, stubborn, but the fog made everything uncertain, and the voice was so confident, so familiar, so sure. And I realized something else. The voice wasn't just telling me directions. It was telling me what I feared. "You're going to fall," it said softly. "A beat. Your ankle will snap. A beat. And no one will hear you." My breath hitched. My mind flashed images of being alone out here, leg twisted, phone dead, fog swallowing my screams. The voice fed those images, gently, like it was planting them. "Sit," it said again. "Close now. Intimate." Just for a second, I stopped. My knees trembled from exertion. The wind shoved at my shoulders. My body felt suddenly heavy, like gravity had doubled. I found a rock sheltered slightly from the gusts and sat. The moment I sat, the voice sighed, almost pleased. "That's better," it said. And then the world shifted. The fog thickened abruptly, dropping like a curtain. The ridge vanished. The cairns disappeared. The sound of wind dulled, as if cotton had been stuffed into the air. My own breath sounded distant. I stood quickly, panic spiking. "Okay," I said out loud, trying to anchor myself. "Okay, no. I'm leaving. I'm turning back." The voice chuckled. It didn't sound like my sister anymore. It sounded like an imitation that had gotten bored of pretending. "You don't know where back is," it said. My stomach dropped. I pulled my phone out, hands shaking, and turned airplane mode off. The screen lit my face in the fog. No signal, GPS struggling. Battery low? I looked up, and in the thick white, I saw footprints. Not mine. Bare footprints, in damp grit on the rock, leading away from me, leading into fog. The voice whispered, right beside my ear, warm as breath, "Follow." I backed away, stumbling, refusing to look away from those prints. My heart hammered. I forced myself to move in the opposite direction, feeling for trail markers with my eyes, my hands, my instincts. Then through the fog, I heard something else. A whistle. A real whistle, sharp and human, followed by a shout. "Hey, anyone out there?" Hope hit me like lightning. I yelled back until my throat burned. "I'm here." The shout came closer. The fog thinned slightly, as if the world wanted me to be found. A ranger emerged, bundled, face tight with concern. Behind him, another person, also geared, searching. "You're way off route," the ranger said, voice urgent. "You okay?" I nodded, breathless, terrified of sounding insane. I told him I'd sat for a second, lost the markers, couldn't see. He looked at the ridge behind me, then back at me. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "People sit down up here, and they don't get up." As we walked back down, the voice was gone, or so I thought. That night, safe in my motel room, I showered, ate, and tried to laugh at myself. I lay in bed with the window cracked, listening to traffic and distant human life, telling myself it was over. Then, from the hallway outside my room, I heard my sister's voice, clear as day, saying my name, gentle, concerned, like she was standing just outside my door. I sat up, frozen, and the voice, no longer pretending to be her, whispered softly through the gap under the door. "You did the right thing," it said. "You listened." Story 4. Waiting for Nightfall, Catskill Mountains, New York. The fall happened so fast, my mind didn't register it as a fall at first. It registered impact. A sudden, brutal shift from upright to pain. I was hiking alone in the Catskills because it was supposed to be simple. A day hike, a loop, something scenic. The kind of trail you see people do in sneakers on social media. captions about peace and gratitude. I'd underestimated the way wet leaves turn rock into glass. I remember stepping onto a flat stone, my boot sliding, my body tipping. I remember the brief, weightless moment where my brain thought, catch yourself. Then my leg hit the edge of a rock with a sound I felt more than heard, a deep crack that traveled up my bones. I screamed before I knew I was going to. When I tried to move, pain exploded, white hot, blinding. I looked down and saw my lower leg at an angle that didn't belong to any human body. It took my breath away. It took my mind away for a second. I forced myself to breathe, to think, to not pass out. Phone, I thought. Call, get help. I fumbled for it with shaking hands, screen smeared with dirt, no signal, of course. I tried again, holding it up, walking it a few inches higher with my arm like that would change anything. Nothing. The forest around me was beautiful in the most indifferent way. Sunlight filtering through branches, leaves glowing gold, the air smelling like damp earth. It felt like the world should not look so peaceful when you are broken. I dragged myself to the side of the trail, because some rational part of me feared another hiker might come, might step on me, might not see me. It took everything I had to move those few feet. Every shift of my leg sent pain spiking, making black spots swim in my vision. I ended up propped against a tree, leg extended, sweating despite the cold. I tried to splint it with a trekking pole and my jacket. It was sloppy, but it reduced movement. I shouted, help. My voice sounded small. It vanished in the trees. I tried again. Help. Nothing answered. Minutes passed. Then longer. The sun moved. Shadows lengthened. I realized something would slow dread. Even if someone walked by, they might not see me. Trails curve. People look at their feet, their phones, their own worlds. I was just another shape, off the path. I took out my whistle and blew until my lungs hurt. Still nothing. The first animal arrived in the late afternoon. I heard it before I saw it. A soft rustle, deliberate, not the random scuttle of a squirrel. I turned my head and saw a black shape moving between trees, low and cautious. A bear. Not huge, but big enough. Black fur, head low, sniffing. It paused, looking toward me. Fear did something strange then. It sharpened me. The pain faded behind a wave of adrenaline. I grabbed a rock and threw it, weakly, and shouted, hey, get out of here. The bear didn't bolt. It just watched. Then it turned and moved away, slow, like it wasn't afraid, like it had time. I tried to convince myself it was just passing through. Bears avoid people. Bears aren't interested. But as the light dimmed, I realized that injury changes the rules. Blood has a smell. Sweat has a smell. Fear has a smell too, metallic and sour. And I was stuck. As evening approached, more sounds joined the woods. Not birds, not insects, something else. Footsteps in leaves, soft and patient, circling farther out. Coyotes, I thought. Or maybe just deer. But then I saw the eyes. They appeared first as small reflections in the darkening brush. 2 dots, then another pair, then another. Not close, not yet, but present, watching, waiting. My heart hammered. I forced myself to sit upright, to look bigger, to keep moving so I didn't look dead. I shouted. I threw sticks. I banged my trekking pole against a rock, trying to fill the woods with human noise. The eyes didn't leave. They only shifted, like a crowd adjusting their view. Night fell with a cruelty I will never forget. The temperature dropped quickly. The forest became a different world, a world of darkness and sound. My little headlamp cast a narrow beam, bright but powerless against the black beyond it. The eyes multiplied. I heard soft snuffling, distant, then closer. My throat went raw from shouting. My body shook from cold and pain. I wrapped my emergency blanket around myself, crinkly and loud, and the sound felt like an invitation. Then something stepped into my headlamp beam. Not a bear, a coyote. Thin, gray, moving like a shadow with bones. It paused at the edge of my light, staring at me with a calm that felt intelligent. I screamed at it. I threw a rock. It flinched back, but not far. It waited, just beyond reach. Another appeared behind it, then another. They didn't rush. They didn't snarl. They watched like they were studying the exact moment when fear turns into weakness. I realized then that the horror wasn't being attacked immediately. The horror was being evaluated. I grabbed my lighter and flicked it, watching the tiny flame flare. The light seemed pathetic, but fire is primal. I held it up, shaking. The coyotes didn't care much. But then, deeper in the trees, I heard a heavier movement, slow, deliberate. The bear again. My breath hitched. The forest felt suddenly crowded with hunger. I sat there in that small bubble of headlamp light, broken leg, throbbing, cold creeping in, surrounded by eyes that came and went, always present, always waiting. Time became a smear. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound made me jerk. At some point, I heard a distant human voice, a shout. It was faint, maybe imagined, but hope surged, raw and desperate. I blew my whistle until my lips went numb. I screamed until my throat burned. And then I heard it again. Closer, real. Hello? Anyone? I sobbed, because I couldn't stop it. Here, I yelled. I'm here. A flashlight beam cut through the trees, bright and strong, sweeping. It hit my reflective emergency blanket and stopped. 2 rescuers emerged, headlamps bouncing. Relief hit me so hard I almost blacked out. As they approached, the eyes in the dark vanished, like the forest had decided the show was over. One rescuer knelt beside me, hands gentle, voice calm. "You're okay," he said, though his expression said otherwise. "You're okay. We've got you." As they lifted me onto a stretcher, I saw something at the edge of the light, just beyond the trees. The coyote from earlier, sitting calmly, watching, tail curled, not afraid, not angry, patient. And as they carried me away, I realized the worst thing. If those rescuers had been 30 minutes later, those eyes would have stopped watching. They would have started eating. Story 5. The Time Between Steps. Yosemite National Park, California. I remember the storm because it sounded like the sky tearing itself open. Yosemite has a scale that makes you feel small in a way that is almost spiritual. Granite walls that look like they were carved by gods, forests that stretch with quiet authority, waterfalls that sound like distant applause. I went with the usual mix of reverence and arrogance, because that's what people bring to places like that. Awe, and the belief that awe will protect them. It was midday when the weather shifted. 1 minute it was sun, crisp blue sky, hikers moving up and down the trail like ants. The next, clouds rolled in fast, bruised and heavy. The wind picked up, sudden and cold, and the air smelled like electricity. I checked my phone. Weather app showed a chance of storms, but nothing severe. Yosemite laughed at my weather app. Thunder cracked so close it felt like the sound punched the rock. People around me started turning back, quickening their pace. I hesitated, looking ahead, then behind. I was partway up a higher trail, not a summit push, but exposed in sections. Then hail started, hard pellets that stung my face and bounced off granite. The wind shoved them sideways so they hit like thrown gravel. The trail became slick instantly, and the temperature dropped in a breath. I knew enough to know what lightning does on exposed rock. I knew enough to know staying out there was worse than losing time. I looked for shelter and saw, ahead, a shallow granite alcove, an indentation in the rock wall where climbers might tuck in during sudden weather. It wasn't deep like a cave, but it broke the wind, and it offered a roof from hail. I ran for it, boots skidding, hands out for balance. Inside, the world narrowed. The alcove was cold, damp with seepage, smelling of wet stone and mineral. Water ran in thin rivulets down the walls. The sound of hail on granite was deafening. I crouched, hugging myself, listening to thunder roar over the valley. My heart hammered. Lightning flashed, white and violent, and for a moment the opening of the alcove looked like the mouth of some huge creature swallowing light. I stayed there, waiting for the storm to pass. Time felt odd in that space. The sound was constant, so there was no rhythm, no markers, just impact after impact, thunder rolling, wind howling. At some point, the hail softened into rain. The thunder moved farther away. The light outside changed, less harsh. I stood slowly, stiff, and peered out. The storm had shifted down the valley, leaving mist and wet rock. The trail outside looked darker, soaked, but it was there. I stepped out, carefully, boot testing traction, and then something happened that made my mind stumble. The trail marker I'd been following was gone. Not moved, not hidden, gone. I looked around, confused. The painted blaze on the rock that I remembered, the one that had reassured me I was en route, wasn't there. The rock face looked bare, older somehow, more weathered. I frowned, thinking maybe I'd misremembered, maybe the marker was farther along. I walked forward. The path seemed wrong. Not dramatically, just subtle things that stacked. The dirt was more compacted, like it had been walked on far more. The edges of the trail were lined with small stones in a way I didn't recall. A signpost ahead had different lettering than I remembered, cleaner, newer, and the forest sounded different. The birdsong was wrong, or maybe it was the absence of the usual chatter. The air smelled not just wet, but like smoke, faint and distant. I felt disoriented, like waking up from a nap and not knowing where you are for a second. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. The screen loaded, and I stared. The date. It was wrong. I blinked hard, certain I'd misread it, but it stayed. It showed a date months later than the day I'd started. My first thought was that my phone had glitched, that it had lost sync, that it was confused. But the time of day matched the position of the sun. My stomach churned. I checked my photos for proof, for sanity, for the morning. The photos were there, but the timestamps were now months ago. I backed up, heart racing, and looked at the alcove. The rock face around it looked different too. Water stains were darker, longer, as if they'd been running longer than a single storm. Small plants had grown in cracks near the entrance, plants I would have noticed when I ran in. I stood there, staring, trying to force my brain to accept a normal explanation. Disorientation, shock, wrong trail, wrong alcove. But my body knew something my mind didn't want to admit. Something had shifted. I started walking faster now, needing a ranger station, a person, a sign, anything. The trail led down toward a more populated area. I expected to see hikers soon. It took too long. When I finally saw people, they looked different. Not in some obvious way, but in gear, in style. A few carried newer-looking packs. One person had a drone case, another wore earbuds. I knew those things existed, but the concentration of them felt like a different year. I approached a couple, voice shaking. "Hey, can you tell me what day it is?" They looked at me like I was joking. Then like I wasn't. They told me. It matched my phone. My mouth went numb. I stumbled toward a ranger station area, moving on autopilot. When I reached it, a ranger behind the counter glanced up, and the expression on his face shifted from casual to sharp. "What's your name?" he asked immediately. I told him. His eyes widened slightly, and he reached for a binder, flipping pages fast, like he'd done it before. He found something and went still. He looked up at me with a face that made my stomach drop through the floor. He started, then stopped, as if he didn't know how to say it. I swallowed. "What?" He turned the binder toward me, a missing person report. My name, my photo, the clothes I'd been wearing. The report said I'd vanished on a hike months ago. I stared until my vision blurred. "That's impossible," I whispered. I was just here. The storm. I went into an alcove for an hour. The ranger's face was pale in a controlled way, like he was trying not to show emotion. "We searched," he said quietly. "We searched a lot. We had dogs, helicopters, volunteers. We found your car. We found your trail plan. We didn't find you." My legs went weak. I sat down hard on a bench, hands shaking so violently I couldn't hold my phone. The ranger crouched beside me. "Where did you shelter?" he asked. I told him, pointing on a map, describing the granite indentation, the way it faced the nearby boulder. He listened with tight focus. Then he stood and spoke into his radio, voice low. When he came back, his face had changed. Not disbelief, not concern, fear. He sat again, and he looked at me carefully. "There's an alcove up there," he said slowly. "People take shelter in it sometimes. But..." He hesitated. "But what?" He licked his lips as if the words tasted wrong. "We don't call it that," he said. "Not officially. But people do. What do they call it?" He looked away toward the window, toward the granite walls in the distance, and for a moment he looked like a man remembering things he wished he could forget. "The gap," he said quietly. "The place where time slips." My skin prickled. He told me, in careful pieces, that I wasn't the first. That every few years, someone vanished in bad weather, and then, rarely, someone returned. Confused, unchanged, insisting it had only been hours. always from around the same section, always after storms. My throat tightened. Where was I asked. What happened to me? He shook his head. I don't know, he said. But I know this. When you were missing, your family came here, your friends. They begged us to keep looking. They held vigils. They put your face on posters. I stared at him, numb, imagining my life continuing without me, my absence hardening into fact. I didn't. I started, voice breaking. I didn't feel anything. He nodded, expression grim. That's what they all say. When they finally drove me down to the nearest town for medical evaluation, the world looked wrong in subtle ways. Billboards I didn't recognize. Construction where I swore there hadn't been. New paint on old buildings. The future had moved on without asking permission. At the clinic, they asked questions I couldn't answer. They checked for dehydration, injury, trauma. My body was fine. That was the worst part. Because if my body was fine, then the missing time wasn't something I could blame on pain or delirium. It was something else. That night, I sat in a hotel room, staring at my hands, listening to the hum of air conditioning, trying to convince myself it was real. I called my family. The calls were broken by sobbing and disbelief. They wanted details, proof, explanation. I had none. I lay in bed and closed my eyes. And in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw the alcove again. The whetstone, the narrow opening, the sound of hail. But now, in my memory, there was something I hadn't noticed at the time. A second sound beneath the storm. A faint, rhythmic sound, like footsteps on stone. Slow, patient, moving deeper into the rock. And in that memory, I realized something that made my stomach twist. I hadn't been alone in that shelter. I'd just been too busy surviving the weather to notice what was sharing the darkness with me. The next morning, my phone showed a new photo in my camera roll, time-stamped during my missing months. It was black at first glance, a dark frame. But when I turned up the brightness, when I stared long enough, I saw it. The inside of the alcove, lit dimly by some pale, unnatural glow. And in the center of the image, standing upright where no person had been, was a shape that looked almost human, except the limbs were too long, the angles wrong. Its head was tilted toward the camera, like it knew what a camera was, like it had used my phone, like it had been waiting for the moment I stepped into its time. And the caption beneath the photo, typed in my notes app, was a single sentence I do not remember writing. Not my voice, not my phrasing, just a quiet fact. You were gone longer than you think. You have reached the end of tonight's trail, the last stretch of ground before the forest closes back in and pretends it was never disturbed. If any of these stories stayed with you, if you felt your breath slow during the silence, if you caught yourself imagining how quickly a trail can disappear, or how small a person feels once the trees stop responding, do not let the hike end here. Subscribe to join me for more journeys where familiar paths become unreliable, where nature does not chase, it waits, and where the most dangerous moment is the one where nothing seems wrong yet. Tell me in the comments which trail followed you the longest, which story felt too close to something you have done, or something you almost did, on a normal day with a full water bottle and confidence you did not realize was fragile. Like the video so these stories reach others who walk the same paths we do, the ones who know the real danger is not always the fall, or the storm, or the animal in the dark, but the quiet realization that the woods are no longer reacting to you at all. And if you have your own hiking story, a moment you stepped off trail and could not find your way back, a voice you heard where no one should have been, a stretch of time you cannot explain, a night spent waiting to be found, or a trail that looked different on the way out than it did on the way in, you are always welcome to share it. Send your experience to the business email in the channel bio, and it may become part of a future Entity Shadows episode. Thank you for listening, for walking with me through narrow paths, fog-filled forests, and the spaces where the map stops being helpful and instinct takes over. And until next time, stay on the trail, tell someone where you are going, trust your instincts when the woods grow quiet, and remember, the dark awaits.